And one. Hello, and welcome back. Welcome back to a new series.
Yes.
Again, something that we're going to discuss so that you can discuss with your spouse and in your own reflection on marriage, and looking at a funny topic that you came up with, and you had a great discussion with a brother about this, was we should do a series on biblical marriages
that you don't
want. And the first one we were thinking of was the relationship in the Bible. It's usually in First Kings. It's also in Chronicles, of the legendary relationship of Ahab, the king of Israel, and the great Jezebel. Jezebel, one of the most notorious women. But looking at their marriage, and we were talking about this, Ahab and Jezebel, truth be told, had a good marriage.
Well, if you define a good marriage,
they had a good marriage. Yep.
They were a team.
They were a great team.
They were in it together, and they had each other's back. So in that sense, it was a good marriage.
They were a good marriage. If I was seeing them as a couples counsel, I would have been like, these couple, they don't need no counseling. They're doing awesome. They're doing great. They knew each other. Jezebel knew Ahab really, 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 really well. She knew his strengths, his weaknesses. There was a lot of time. There was a time when she saw him be discouraged, and she encouraged him. So it was. They had a good marriage by that definition.
But if you think about in God's eyes, the Bible says that they were evil.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that. In the sense of having a good relationship, but is your goal of your marriage, are you pleasing God in that?
But the goal of marriage is to have a good relationship. And they had a good relationship. Ahab and Jezebel all the way. They could have led a marriage workshop. There was even a point where he was very depressed. And you can read about it. He was very depressed. And she was able to lift him out of depression.
Yeah, babe, but no. Tell him how.
Well, it had to involve slandering somebody's name and getting him killed, literally killed so he could have a vegetable garden near his house. But he was no longer depressed.
He was no longer
I know
depressed.
It's so extreme. It seems horrific to think about, but the biggest thing was she encouraged him towards a very idolatrous, cruel way of leading. And he kind of let her do a lot of his dirty work. And it was just heavily influenced by her spiritually and practically. And together they made a crazy tune. I was thinking about in First Kings, it's the best example that kind of sums up. It was in First Kings chapter 21. In verse 25 said, there was none who sold himself to do what was evil in the sight of the Lord like Ahab, whom Jezebel, his wife, incited. And I thought about it, that so much of us, when we get married, we get a chance, a unique position to see the best and the worst qualities, maybe more than anybody else in our husband or in our wife. And we're in this position, like I know you. I know the parts of you that if incited, no offense, if incited, you could really go down some very not good or just really not good dark paths for you. But I also know what are the paths that I can encourage you in that would really help you, that would help bring out the best. That if you have Jesus as standard, I know what to make Pam a supervillain or a superhero, so to speak.
It's true, because I think about couples who, for example, the husband may have a weakness of purity.
Mm-hmm.
So now, as his wife, you could encourage him. You don't want to have intimacy, and you go ahead, use pornography, pleasure yourself.
I don't have time for that.
I don't have time for that, or you don't feel like doing it, whatever the reason is, and you say, go ahead, use pornography. That's inciting him to evil, because you know purity is his weakness, and you're sending him, as they say, into the lion's den. He's gonna sin against himself. He's gonna sin against God. And yeah, that'll make him happy, but will that be the best thing for him?
Will that be the best? I also think about times when, one of the things, this happens a lot in marriages, you get a chance to hear, if you're married, sometimes the worst complaints about relationships. So, your husband or wife comes to you, that person did this to me, this family member did that to me. And you can either help them grow, or you can help them be very, very, very kind of just bitter, frustrated, do mean things back to the people.
Like, no, don't invite them. We're having a family dinner. They're not coming because da-da-da-da-da-da. And they said da-da-da-da-da. And that would incite them. You
can incite them to instead of going back, let's say, and resolving things,
right,
you can incite them toward now just being like the person, one way or the other.
Yes.
Yep. And so look, I would sum it up with this. You don't want the kind of marriage that is doing really well, but is doing well because you're inciting your spouse to do things that are just against what's good, against God, brings them into the worst parts of their character. But it works. Basically, Bonnie and Clyde had a great relationship, right? Like, just like these guys did. But many atrocities have been done by this kind of marriage. Men and women who bring out the worst
in their spouse.
And so, look, I want to give you this encouragement and just something to think about is think about what you can do with your particular spouse to bring out the best. What quality of character, what fruit of the Spirit do you want to nurture? Do you want to encourage? You know their weakness. Excellent. You know what they need. Is your husband a conflict avoider? You can make somebody who's a conflict avoider very bitter. Say, that's right. Those people don't deserve you. Or you could help them. You know what? Let me pray. Why don't you go back and talk to that guy and just tell him, he probably doesn't know that you're mad at him or, whatever. I just use that as one example. Bring out the best in your spouse. Really, that is one of the gifts of being so close to the person God has put this in your life. So that's a biblical marriage you don't want to have. Think about it. Bring out the best. Talk about that. What are some things that you want to bring out for good in your spouse? And this has been great.